Yeah, but he's gonna text me. No need.
Getting everyone in. Hello, everyone. Just waiting for a couple to join still. We'll get started. Okay, so everyone from the reading room is now in, it looks like. We have a couple still connecting to the audio. And I'll keep letting people in as they join. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. This is a great turnout for Ask the Expert. Today we have a little bit of a special presentation for you all. We decided to pick a topic that might be relevant to our audience, which clearly seems to do the trick. So I will turn it over to Dave, who is our marketing specialist. He can introduce himself and the team that you'll be hearing from today. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. I'll monitor that and we can get them asked. Or, pipe in if you have something to add. But we'll get started.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So David Eilers, I teach in the Innovation Law Center with my colleague Brian Gerling, Molly Zimmerman, and Carly, as well as the Whitman School of Management. And our program, for those of you who don't know, combines business, engineering, and law. We used to say when I had an incubator on campus, we need good IP, better science, and great markets. So that covers everything. We take on clients because we're NYSTAR funded who have real technology commercialization challenges. And so we do a number of landscapes. Some of those landscapes we're able to point entrepreneurs and inventors toward adjacent markets that they might not have been thinking of. And our topic for today is those instances where we might advise, we don't practice law, but we give good counsel. We might someone to go to an unregulated market on their way to scaling up business. So we have a few examples. Mary is she's already graduated from her MBA program, but she's going for a master's in science. And she'll give one example, and then we can just dialogue and ask questions, put them in the chat, as Carly said, or we'll take them a little bit later on. Any questions before Mary gets started? Or any expectations? Everybody's in the right spot, right? Okay. Mary, do you want to get started?
Okay. Hello, everyone. So today I'm gonna give a case study for a company. So it's on a nanotechnology company that design and produces the membranes and membrane-enabled products based on its silicon membrane technologies. So in short, the potential business sectors for the application of that technologies include the research and medical. And so for the purpose of our meeting today, I will be talking about the application in medical field, or to be specific, in the dialyzer field. The So it will be the process of including that technology in the dialyzer and as a platform technology within medical devices. The company or its customer won't have to require the FDA Food and Drug Administration approval prior to any marketing activities. So the complexity and the duration of that regulatory approval process must be considered in the commercialization strategy for any new medical device. So under the consideration, there are 4 possible ways for that company to get into the dialyzer market. The first one is to licensing their IP. The second one is to sell the filter that they can produce on their own. So they integrate that technology into the filter and then send it and then sell it to the dialyzer producers. And then the third one is a joint venture with some other producers to produce the whole dialyzer, or the fourth one is to develop the whole dialyzer on their own. So to choose between among the 4 possible ways mentioned, we have to analyze the risk, the cost, and the financial returns of each possible way, because all of those have an impact on what the optimal strategy will be given the status of the firm as a startup on the market. So the first one, from the perspective of risk, selling the filter to OEM, original equipment manufacturer, or licensing the IP would be licensing the IP to a firm capable of producing a dialyzer appears most prudent, even though the IP risk is higher for these approaches. The technical and market risk is much lower given the complexity of dialyzer production and the high concentration on the dialyzer market. Second one, from the perspective of the cost, the huge cost related to designing and producing the whole dialyzer also tends to favor a strategy of either licensing the IP or just selling the filters, because the research and development cost associated to producing a dialyzer could be in the range of $30 to $40 million based on a similar startup in that space. And as a class 2 medical device, the dialyzer would also require a clinical study for the FDA approval, which would add an average $1.5 to $3 million to the production cost. So it's kind of not a good financial, not a good strategy for the firm in terms of financing. And the third one is from the perspective of financial return. We can only see that the long-term financial return for the company to produce the whole dialyzer on its own would be much better in comparison to the other options with a market capitalization for dialysis products in the United States estimated to be about $30 billion. Based on that, back to that time, there was adequate justification for that strategy. However, the short-term financing requirement associated with that production make it not optimal choice. So while sacrificing the long-term return, the firm could alternatively license the IP or sell the filter for inclusion in a dialyzer. So those options may be well suited to the company as a means to raise the capital for more attractive product development later. So in general, the recommended business strategy for the firm would be to license the IP, the minimum risk involved, and the high short-term benefit for the company suggest this rather conservative strategy. And given also, again, for a new firm like that to be able to secure the revenue and also secure the needed cash flow would be an optimal strategy for them, because the first one is to secure capital for their later product development, and the second one is having a frequent revenue would help to raise the firm's valuation, which is good for their investment pitch deck. Yeah.
Good. So I should have probably set up the work of the Innovation Law Center and the program that we're funded to run through NYSTAR. We're doing due diligence studies, and it has those landscapes that I talked about, specifically an IP landscape, a freedom to operate landscape, market landscape, a regulatory landscape, and obviously with market that includes competition. So, you know, with a technology startup, you want to start on the low end of the slant board. So even though the dialysis market was the richest, obviously there's a lot of people with end-stage renal failure. It wasn't their entry market. Their entry market was more the laboratory market, but given the dollars that it takes for FDA clearance, they could be cash flow positive on their way to their ultimate market. Molly, I don't know if you're able to talk about one of the Genius programs in a different field, UAV, the Genius program, if you're not familiar with it, does drones, but one of the clients there, when we were working with Genius, had an ultimate market for their drone market, but they could also target commercial buildings. And I believe it was heat loss, right?
Yes, they had in mind to do roof repair estimates. And we found a number of patents that were right on target. And so the company was able to pivot and go towards solar panel installation estimates. And this often happens with companies that they are confronted with a risk that they have to assess and make a decision about. And in that case, they were really happy that they did pivot, because subsequently this company, Eagle View, asserted its patents against many other early stage companies that were kind of copying this. Although it's not even fair to say copying, it's a good idea. And when there's a good idea, people are going to come up with a good solution. And they just did it without taking the time to do the due diligence, which is what we really like to provide for people.
Good. So with that, you know, sort of groundwork for our topic, those are good examples of with good intelligence and knowing when to pivot. It doesn't mean you have to lose track of your ultimate market, your scale-up market, but there may be another way to become cash flow positive. So I'd just be interested from a number of perspectives, open it up for dialogue. What have you used in your practices, innovation practices, knowing when to pivot and yet not lose sight of your ultimate market? Any experience in that regard?
While you're all thinking of that, another example that comes to mind is a bio company that wanted to use an anti-inflammatory compound to help people. But before they could get through the FDA, they were able to go to the veterinary market more quickly. And as Dave said, start bringing in money as they held on to their ultimate goal of producing it for people. Tom, did you have
a common one in healthcare is you do vet, companion animal vet, fewer regulatory requirements. I won't say there aren't any, but on the way to the human market. So. Any
Yeah.
other examples from your side?
Yeah, my comment, it's not technology driven, but it follows the same principle. I came from a leadership development company, and that was always their end goal. And it literally took many years to get to it because it's so difficult to get a leader to own up to the fact that maybe they're the ones that needs assistance and change. They're kind of the last ones to come on board. They're always fix the rest of the people. They're the problem. And we kind of saw that early on. We made some attempts many years ago when we first started, found great difficulty in it. And so it was like, okay, where's an easier entry point? And now every owner wants more sales. So we repackaged, rethought of our principles, our concepts, molded them back into good services for kind of specialty areas within the sales function, because you have your golden childs who you can't touch with a 10-foot pole. And so we found that easier entry point, and then things could evolve. Then we could eventually figure out how to make all the other segues.
That's a great point. Yeah. So sometimes it's because the technology development cycle is a long one. The other, and this is true of healthcare as well, the sales cycle is a long one. And so you need something with more immediate appeal than
Right.
can get to the ultimate.
Yep.
And I can tell you, it is a long sales cycle in healthcare.
Yes.
Well, every hospital wants to know who else is using it. Well, nobody wants to go first. That makes it a long sales cycle.
No early joiners, no risk takers there.
No, not in a highly regulated market.
No.
Especially when, and no offense to our students that are 3Ls, when there's attorneys close by. So anyway, other examples from anybody else in the group? I was going to call on Paul Brooks to see if he had good examples of pivots that were either technology related or in some cases sales cycle related.
I'd like to be able to help, but I'm at a loss right now.
Not a problem. Are there any other, I did mention that we do due diligence in a number of areas. When we have these expert sessions, sometimes people have a legal question. Or, I will say that we've got a number of guidebooks that help startups and entrepreneurs. And Carly, maybe you can say what some of those guidebooks are that are available on our website. Maybe just put that in the chat as well.
Yeah, I'm actually pulling it up right now.
Okay. Well, that's true. You can share your screen.
I can share my screen too. So we do
The
have,
reason, one of the reasons we initially, of course, the law students are learning how to, what goes into getting a patent or other types of intellectual property protection. And it just became clear over the years how important it is to also understand the market, because so often, a patent attorney can get people some kind of a patent. It may not be a particularly broad or valuable patent. And without understanding the market and the different factors that go into it, people sometimes invest in patents that and later regret that investment. Because if their goal is to get a product to market, they sometimes equate getting a patent with being able to do that. And so one of the reasons we're so happy to have Dave a part of the team is the law students start learning from business students like Mary and others that have come over the years, how to dig into a market, understand it, and how that's useful for the client.
So one of the guidebooks, we talked about, long technology development cycle. One of the guidebooks is on FDA regulations. And Mary mentioned the one client that had the filtration going through FDA. And so there's a number of FDA classes depending on how invasive you are. There's also guidance on de novo classifications. So generally, class 1 and class 2 are a little simpler because there's a predicate device or a known technology. And it's kind of interesting dealing with startups and entrepreneurs because on the one hand, with IP, you want to be new and novel, non-obvious. There's a number of other standards. But when it comes to FDA, where they're determining safety and efficacy, you don't want to be novel. You want to be known, at least in your core technology and core techniques. So one example and one regulatory requirement, but it does, it's a different standard on each side. So any questions or things that you'd like to ask maybe our legal experts or our summer associates? Welcome to the test. By the way, I do want to just take a second to thank Scott Hancock from Binghamton, who was able to showcase his facilities down at Binghamton and the Kauffman Center the other week. So really appreciate your help, Scott, in opening up your incubator to our students.
That's our pleasure. It was really Eric Crone, who heads up incubation services, did most of the hosting. But yeah, it was a good experience, and it's always good to meet in person as well with the team and faculty and the student team members.
Yeah, we're just getting used to that. So the meeting in person part.
We've had a couple new people join in the last couple minutes. So just to fill you in, we did have a conversation on startups and pivots with examples around that. But we also are open to any question that you may have for any of our, staff or the student researchers we have this summer. So feel free to hop in with anything you have.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ellie Rustling I'm from Micro Era Power, and I apologize I missed the first part of the presentation. A meeting went long. I'm curious to know what advice you would have in terms of filing IP provisional versus other types of filing. And I know there's always a cost issue that we're weighing out, but are there reasons that we would choose not to file a provisional before we get too far along the path? Or is a provisional all we need to sort of hold that place in line?
That's a great question. I was going to say, I'm going to call on you, Dom.
Provisional is a great way to lock in the priority date. If you know that other people are working on the same problem, you can file a provisional and save that priority date, which is very important. The downside is that if your technology is being developed and you file a provisional on what you think the non-provisional will be, and then 2 months later, you find that you really didn't cover what you needed to cover. So you may have wasted that money and time. And so you may need to file another provisional. So that's what happened. People tend to file too early before their design is nailed down. So if it is nailed down, and you definitely want to save that date, that's a great way to do it. Okay, it's fairly inexpensive. It's fairly easy. The only caveat is that if you're going to file in Europe, that the provisional needs to have claims. Provisionals in this country don't need claims. You can file a paper, you can file a PowerPoint presentation if it has all the elements of what you're trying to protect. Okay, but if you're filing in Europe, they don't accept the priority date unless there are claims. So that's something I didn't realize, because you don't need claims, and then I find all these provisionals with claims and you wonder why they're doing it, but it's because they want to file in Europe eventually. And also, when the year is over, sometimes there's a rush to file a non-provisional for many reasons. People sort of lose track of time and things sort of happen. And they contact their lawyer and they say, I need to file the non-provisional in the next week. It's really good to have the provisional in really good shape so you can file it fairly quickly. So.
And
answer.
Of course, your other option is to keep it as a trade secret if there's no public disclosure. But if it's for sale on your website or something like that, that's when first to file comes in, and the guidance that Dom just gave.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you.
And this is Brian Gerling. I just have one other point of clarification there. So the other reason to file your provisional application or a provisional is that you're up against the 1-year bar date. So you've disclosed your invention in a paper, or you presented it at a trade show or something to that effect, and you still want to secure patent protection for that. You've got a 1-year time period in which to file. So that's the other reason that you may want to consider filing a provisional patent application.
Okay, and what is the other option? If we don't file a provisional, what would the other thing be that we would file?
Either a non-provisional or a PCT, which is, the PCT is, that gives you the option to file in any office. But Brian, I think if you want to do PCT without filing in the US, that you have to do something with the USPTO first before you do that. But a non-provisional would be, you would just file once, you'd still have that, that date, because you're only going to get 20 years from the date you file either a provisional or a non-provisional in the US. So those are the other two options, a non-provisional patent application or a PCT application.
Okay, and so if we are intending to file in Europe, would we do the PCT standalone, or would the PCT ride on the heels of the provisional?
Brian, I think are you jumping in there?
You can do.
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on, as Dom pointed out, if you want to file in Europe, you need to file a provisional that has claims, because most of the European bodies don't recognize a provisional without claims. So you wouldn't get the provisional priority date. So that's something to make sure you're discussing with your patent attorney.
And we would put that in place before the PCT.
Well,
I mean, it depends. It's if you've got enough information where you're ready to file, or your patent attorney, believes that you're ready to file a full-blown or non-provisional application, then, in all likelihood, they're going to file a non-provisional application. But if you're still in the development process, it's a crowded field, the strategy might be to go ahead and file a provisional just to lock in the priority date.
Okay, thank you.
I guess, Brian, you can file a PCT right off the bat. You can file and then decide on if you want to file in the US or Germany or England. But you can do that, I believe, right off the bat. PCT then becomes a WO, World Organization. It's a PCT application. So you file that application. And then you have so many months to determine what countries you want to file in. So the US is part of that. So you can file the PCT in the US.
Yeah, I just put the link up for that because it says the, the Patent and Trademark Office in the US shall act as the receiving office for international applications. And that was what I was trying to remember, that, the USPTO wants US applications to, even if you're just going to do PCT, to start there, and they can act as the receiving office.
Right.
Yeah, and then there's also other factors. I mean, if you're in a sensitive area near, arguably your technology could be used for defense department type reasons, military type reasons, you likely need to file in the US first so that they can make a determination as to whether or not it's, military or something to that effect before you would ever file in while Dom is correct, you can file a PCT initially before you would file in another country. If you're in one of those technology sectors, you need to talk to an attorney so that they can make a determination as to whether or not one of these requirements mandate you filing in the US first as opposed to some other country.
Right.
It's kind of similar to the whole export control regulations. The US government reserves the right to ensure that exports aren't against the US interests.
Just from the market perspective on the PCT, generally, and this is a little bit of oversimplifying, but people would file in a country where they either have a ready market, meaning customers, or a known competitor in order to block that competitor in their home country. So again,
Another thing to remember with
lots of reasons to file a PCT, but those are the top two. Sorry, Molly.
No, I was just going to suggest, if you're thinking about international markets, the US Commercial Service is a good resource to keep in mind. At each embassy, there is a group of people that do market research in that country for people in this country. So I think John Tracy is our local representative from the US Commercial Service, but they can be a tremendous resource in helping to sort out which markets would be the best target markets for you and your product.
Molly, what would the title be of the person in that role? And are those services that they provide for a fee, or are those services that are available as part of the U.S. Foreign Service?
I'm not sure if they're part of the Foreign Service. They're part of the U.S. Department of Commerce's International Trade Administration. I'm going to put the link in the, but John Tracy has spoken a few times. His office is somewhere in the general
Was in
area.
Buffalo.
He often goes to the NISTAR resource fairs or resource events. And
No, he's here in Syracuse. He's not in Buffalo.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I've used the U.S. Commercial Service. So in healthcare, you go everywhere there's sick people. So it's pretty universal. And so it's what Molly said is true. It's every embassy for sure, but also some consulates as well, where they have commercial liaisons within the Foreign Service. So there's a commercial officer, and if, yes, they will do research, and there may be a small fee. They will also, if you're meeting a prospective customer, you can use the embassy or consulate. Now this was pre-COVID, so there's that proviso, but you could use the embassy or consulate grounds for your meeting, and they would even provide translation. And then there's a higher level of service called the Gold Key program, where that is for a fee. But yeah, those people in the Foreign Service and Commerce Department are, I know it sounds odd, I'm in the government and I'm here to help, but they're actually there to help. So. And John Tracy's contact is right there. And the good news is it's a 315 number.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
I was thinking of some other folks in the assistance program that are Buffalo, Western New York. Great question. Any other we can help you with?
Another reason why the marketing research can be really helpful is when you have a platform technology and you're trying to figure out where to start. You know, as Dave says, you want to make money on the way to making money, which is the example Mary gave, and with the anti-inflammatory. You know, Pavilion has been at many of the many of the NYSTAR events and spoken. And they have the ability to put solar panels in fabric. And so there's many different things you can do with that. And so sometimes our research is really helpful in sorting out how crowded are different markets, how crowded is the patent landscape. And that can be very valuable in figuring out which one is the quickest path to market with the best prospects for making money first. Because often a new technology can be applied to lots of different applications.
Oh, and one other little nuance. Molly mentioned export controls. So if there is novel technology that could have a defense purpose, or there are sometimes, and I'm not quite sure all of what Micro Era Power does, but there are exemptions for certain countries and certain types of technology. So for example, again, depending on their State Department status, there are exemptions often for food, medicine, medical equipment, things like that, even if we're not doing trade with that country or have normalized relations, just to open up the door. And those are administrated. It's an actual commercial license. It's called the Office of Foreign Asset Control, or OFAC. And that's part of Treasury. And it's not an onerous process, but anytime you open up, a new market that to new technology, it's usually a pretty rich environment.
And that Office of Foreign Asset Control, is that part of U.S. Department of State or U.S. Department of Commerce?
So you apply through Commerce, and then it gets approved by state.
Got it.
And John Tracy can probably give you the details on that. What are exempt countries and what are technologies that are exportable.
Excellent. Because that is always a concern. If you have a new technology and you send it overseas, particularly to certain countries that are very good at, taking apart and then replicating it, it's daunting. You've worked so hard, you develop so much, and how do you protect something that far away?
Yeah, if it's easily reverse engineered, that's a great reason to apply for a patent. And if you're exporting it, it's a great reason for filing a PCT. Other questions, things we can help with? Are there any questions in the chat, Carly?
Not currently.
Okay. Exporting is an art in itself.
There's a gentleman here in Rochester, Michael Crowley, who has really focused his business on doing patent licensing to countries overseas, especially China, for ways of exporting without exporting goods. It's just the licensing piece, and it's quite a complicated practice that he's developed. Yeah, well, sophisticated is a more thoughtful word.
Yeah, I was going to say art and science, I'm sure.
Yes.
So that would require that there was a patent filed in China, because otherwise it's not illegal to, I mean, that's what some countries do. They look at the disclosures, the patent disclosures that are published, and then they can look and see if a patent has been filed in their country. And if not, then it's actually not illegal to take it and go ahead and develop them themselves.
And that's one of the areas where Michael Crowley has been very clear. And it's not only filing the patent actually, to have the full weight, needs to be filed. It could be in English as our source language, but also in the target language of that country to avoid any misinterpretation or misunderstandings.
Yeah. That's one of the big challenges with patents is, you know, it takes a lot of time and energy to get it filed and granted, but then you're also required to monitor it to make sure that it's not being infringed. I mean, if you want to do that, you have to just take steps, and that's another whole source of revenue that's expended in doing that.
Well, the thing is, the time and effort it takes to patent something, to do it internationally, but then you also have to have the ability to litigate in that country and have representation should somebody infringe or step outside the bounds of that license.
And David, you bring up a really good point. A patent is only as good as your ability to enforce it. So in our selection of a patent attorney, do you have any recommendations whether we go with kind of a small law firm, which is a startup, would, you know, have less overhead, cost less money, or if we're investing in those patents, do we go with a big international law firm just for that sense of sort of King Kong is in the room?
I was going to say, and I would ask Brian to weigh in on this. Are there associations of attorneys where if you need representation overseas, a firm like BS&K would reach out through a network of attorneys, or how would that work?
Yeah, we have relationships with foreign counterparts. So, you know, we serve as the U.S. Patent firm, and then we have relationships all across the world with various firms in different countries that file patents on behalf of our clients in those particular countries.
And Brian, I'm so sorry. What is the name of your firm?
Oh, sure. It's Bond, Shenick and King. And we have a Rochester office.
That's a great law office.
Well, thank you. Appreciate
I was
that.
going to say, Brian appreciates any endorsements and recommendations. So.
But Ellie, we could talk offline and, you know, have further discussion about, you know, what your strategy is, and, you know, how we could help, or how, maybe some other firm is another way to go, another option. So happy to have that conversation.
Very helpful and very timely, because Micro Era Power was very fortunate. We were in contact with Molly Zimmer, and she put us in contact with Dom, and they worked with a group of students in the spring semester at Syracuse Law Innovation and Technology Center and prepared this excellent report. It's a 59-page report identifying the landscape, the sort of, what was it? Dom, help me out, right to...
Yeah, we did patent landscape, we did patentability, freedom to operate, we did market, and I don't believe we did regulatory, but.
No, I don't think we did regulatory, but it had, yeah, it was freedom to operate. That's where I was stuck.
Right. And it was a pleasure working with you.
Well, and really appreciated that report. I was just reading through it actually earlier this week again, and, it appears that we have, green lights ready to go, but I think the timing, is somewhat sensitive. So Brian, a conversation about how we would get those next steps rolling would be really helpful.
I thought the name sounded familiar because you weren't on in the beginning, but I'm also affiliated with the Innovation Law Center, and I thought we did a report on Micro Era Power. So
Yeah.
I'll shoot you my contact information in the chat here. And
okay, I'll put that on my notes. Thank you very much.
Lots of experience, lots of good resources. And, the reason we do this at Ask the Expert is just to dialogue and see where we can bring value for the New York State, particularly in upstate, tech economy, because we'd like to keep people here. So.
Well, David, I so appreciate that. And I'll tell you, Micro Era Power is working really hard. We're working on closing our seed round right now. Need just a couple more investors so we can finish that project off, and we will be ready to roll.
Nice.
We're negotiating right now a NYSERDA contract, which has a cost share. We need some working capital, and I think we'll be getting closer to bring this product, out of the concept and out in the market, which is very exciting.
Nice. Yeah.
That's exciting.
And that's part of the reason we were talking about, entry markets, because, funders, in general, if you have a good idea, you have a white paper on your good idea, great. It's great, even better if you have IP, but when you start to generate revenue, that's when they really start to care. So seed rounds are probably the toughest, and then it's easier from there. So
I'm hoping.
I was going to say, and I'm sure other people with that same experience could vouch for that.
Yeah, I have that same experience. So I work for a consulting firm, and we have kind of some clients who are startup firms. And something that I remember the most from my experience is kind of the emphasis on speed to revenue. So is from an investor perspective, if you can kind of secure some revenue before you come to talk to them, it will be a great signal to them to say that, so you have a great product, and then your product is really have some value propositions inside it, so that they will have a lot more confidence in investing in your company. So whatever the revenue stream is, as long as we can secure some of it before we go to talk to investor, it will be a great selling point.
Yeah. What's the real challenge on our front, and I won't take this conversation too far askew, is that we're working in deep tech. So it's hardware with a software component, but because it is hardware, it's not a quick to revenue product. But when we do kind of cross that hurdle, it's a big market that's waiting for us.
It's really exciting. We love to profile success stories in our newsletter. So keep us posted, write to Carly or I, and we'll be sure and put a profile in.
All right, Molly, we'll be working hard towards that.
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
Ellie, just out of curiosity, how did you hear about the Innovation Law Center so that the student researchers got to do your project in the spring? Remember what the connection point was?
I'm going to need Molly's help on this, but Molly, I think we were introduced through Nexus New York, which was run out of High Tech Rochester, which has since rebranded as
NextCore.
Score.
NextCore.
Which is why it's so confusing, because it was, yep, that's right, yep.
Yeah,
I
name
really-
changes are hard.
I really love High Tech Rochester. It explained exactly who they are, what they do, and where they are.
Yeah, I know. I miss it too. And I miss that, the accelerator, the next, the NYSERDA sponsored clean
Yeah.
energy.
Doug Berkeley did a great job with that. I mean,
Yes.
he is so sharp and just a really good thinker. You know, learned a lot from Doug.
Yeah. You're a wonderful source of positives, Ellie. Thank you for logging on today.
Oh, well, I just so appreciate everything you guys have done. And as a startup, to have a resource where somebody will look very carefully in depth at what you're pulling together and then give feedback that's very concrete and documented, that is just, you know, that's worth the world to us. And as we're going out, we're speaking with investors, they ask about our IP, and we'll say, well, we have 3 invention disclosures, which are positioned and ready to file. We're looking to close this round so we can file them. It's really helpful to have that documented. We don't share that document with them, but I share a little excerpt from the executive summary to give them peace of mind.
Mhm.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
So good.
All part of due diligence. On their part.
Yeah, we're being due diligence left, right, front, and center. So far, so good. We'll hope that it rolls the right way.
Indeed, and I put in the chat that Launch New York, which Paul and I have been affiliated with, is sometimes a good resource for seed funding as well.
David,
So
would you be willing to put a little pitch into was it Marnie Levine about that?
Yeah, so I know Marnie quite well, as does Paul. If you have something, I'll put my email in the chat. You can send me something, but there's a pretty easy application process. Be assigned entrepreneur in residence and coach you through getting ready for the investment committee.
Yeah.
And now up to 4 funds, depending on your location, including a limited partner fund that invests with the seed fund. So
Wow.
it can be a good source of early capital.
If Micro Air Power is affiliated with CBIP, the Clean Energy Business Incubator Program down in Stony Brook, does that preclude our participation in Launch New York?
I don't think so, but that's a great question to ask because they also have some clean tech up there.
Is
I'm
that
sure
Dave
we've-
Hamilton's group?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to figure out why it'd be precluded, but you know, sometimes there's weird rules, but.
Well, that's a helpful prompt, David. I'll shoot an email to Marnie just to ask if we could take a run through that.
Yep.
Okay. I have a 1 o'clock meeting coming up.
And we wrap up at 1 too. So if there's any lingering questions, feel free to email them to me. If you guys ever have an idea of something like we did in the beginning, where, you know, we kind of have something that's prepared to kick us off to a conversation, please let me know. We're always taking in, you know, recommendations, or if you have questions that you would like, you know, ahead of time for us to know and prepare, please let us know. But
We
thank
can
you,
always do
everyone.
research in advance.
Yeah. Have a
Thanks,
good day.
everybody.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody, so much.
Bye, Ellie.
Bye.